welcome to Classic Value Investors. My name is Mariusz Konieczny. And the other day, just in case you didn't watch it, I made a video, this one here, oil tanker fleet comparison between 9 companies, where I took these following companies and I compared the fleet size and then the fleet age to each other. Now, I'm not going to go over this. If you're interested, just watch that video and I put a link in the description below. Now, what I want to do is I want to take a little different approach and take the same nine companies and compare them as to how much money you are paying per ship. Because at the end of the day, that's really what matters. Are we overpaying for a ship, or are we underpaying? Because really what it is with the oil tankers, what we are buying is we are buying a portfolio of ships, and sometimes it's easy to forget that it is kind of important to get a sense of how much it is that we're paying per ship. So as you can see here on the screen, I have 9 companies: DHT, Euronav, Frontline, TK Tankers, International Seaways, DS Shipping, TRMD, Scorpio Tankers, and Nordic American Tankers. So the way I calculated it is from the previous video. We know what the fleet size is, and that's this column here. Then to obtain market cap, well, that's easy. You just figure out how many shares there are and what the stock price per share is. Now the next column, net debt, what I did here is I took long-term debt plus short-term debt, and then I subtracted the cash on the balance sheet to figure out net debt. And the total price, what this is a total price of the enterprise that we're paying. In other words, market cap plus net debt. And it makes sense, because if you were buying a house, let's say for $200,000, you are buying the entire house. You're not buying someone else's equity in it, right? You're buying the whole house. You will put your own mortgage on it, and you will have your own equity that comes from your down payment. So I wanted to look at it the same way. Instead of just looking at the market cap, I wanted to include the debt into it and figure out what is the total enterprise value that we are paying for a particular company. And then once I have that total price, I can take it and I can divide it per ship, because we know how many ships each company has. If you look at the price per ship, and if you didn't know anything else and you just looked at that, you might come into the conclusion that DSSI and TRMD are the cheapest, because you are paying less than 18 million per ship, and DHT appears to be the most expensive because you are paying almost 60 million per ship, and Frontline would be the second most expensive. Now, to make any sort of sense out of this, we kind of have to understand what type of ship that we're buying. When it comes to DHT, if we go and we look at DHT fleet that we looked at before, as I mentioned before, it's total of 27 ships. But what's unique about DHT is that all of them are VLCCs. They're the biggest ships. So 100% of DHT fleet is VLCCs. And if we compared DHT to, let's say, Euronav, which for Euronav you're paying 38 million per ship. And if you look at Euronav, what you will see is that Euronav has 75 ships, but not all of them are VLCCs like for DHT. You can see, yes, there's a lot of VLCCs, but the company also have Suezmaxes, more VLCCs. So if you look at the composition and kind of break it down, out of 75, 46 of Euronav ships are VLCCs and 25 are Suezmaxes. So it's not, completely apples to apples. It's a little different, and it explains why DHT is more expensive than Euronav, because VLCCs are more expensive than Suezmaxes. And another thing that's important to look at is what is the age of these ships. So this is where the other video comes in. When you look at DHT and Euronav, they have a very similar average age. So they're comparable on that front. And when it comes to the newer ships, they have about the same percentage of newer ships, meaning ships that are 5 years or younger. And when it comes to the older ships, then DHT looks a little bit better because it has only 11% of its fleet that is old, while Euronav has 13.3%. So there appear to be priced priced pretty well in relation to each other when you take a look at the composition of the fleet. Now let's take it Euronav, not Euronav. Let's take a look at Frontline. In case of Frontline, the market cap is 1.8 billion, net debt is 1.9 billion for the total price of 3.7 billion, and that gets you 70 ships for the price of 53.7 million. And if again you just looked at this and you said, oh, okay, a Frontline is more expensive than Euronav, and it has a similar number of ships, right? Euronav has 75, Frontline has 70. Why is Frontline more expensive? Well, one thing is useful to look at is the fleet age. Euronav's average age is about 9 years, where Frontline is less than 6 years. So just based on that, we already know that Frontline should be getting a higher price per ship. Just like buying a new car, you're going to pay more for a new car than an older car. So that is one of the explanations why Frontline has a higher price tag per ship. When it comes to the composition of the fleet, we know that Euronav has mostly VLCCs and Suezmaxes, and VLCCs were more than 50% of the fleet. When it comes to Frontline has Suezmaxes, VLCCs, some Afromaxes and LR2s, more VLCCs and Suezmaxes, and more Afromaxes. So in terms of the percentage, VLCCs for Frontline are about 30% of the fleet. So it's less than for Euronav because it has 21 VLCCs, 29 Suezmaxes, and 20 Afromaxes. Okay, now let's move on to TK Tankers. TK Tankers appears to be much cheaper than Frontline, Euronav, and DHT. So why is that? Well, first go back again. TK Tankers has 54 vessels, market cap of 600 million, net debt 681 for a total price of $1.3 billion, and that gets you to almost 24 million per vessel. Why is this less expensive than for the other ones? Well, let's go back and look at the fleet. As you can see, the fleet average age is older than the previous three. It's 11.5 years. When it comes to the older ships, TK has 10 vessels, or 18.5% of the fleet, that is 15 years or older. So on average, TK Tankers has an older fleet than, obviously, than Frontline, because Frontline, most of the fleet is new, where DHT and Euronav do have some older ships. However, for both of these companies, almost 37% or 36% of their fleet is new, where TK has zero newer ships in its fleet. So it makes sense that it would be priced lower. Also, when you look at TK Tankers fleet and you scroll through this, you notice Aframax, Suezmax, Aframax, Suezmax. Then we have a product tanker here, again Aframax. Almost the entire fleet consists of Aframaxes and Suezmaxes. There's only one VLCC, but most of them, out of 54, 18 of them are Aframaxes, 26 of them are Suezmaxes, one is a VLCC, and 9 of them are product tankers. So not only is TK's fleet older than its competitors, but the ships are smaller. With VLCC being the top of the chain. So it perfectly explains why TK Tankers has a price tag of 24 million per ship. Okay, now moving on to International Seaways, it's a little bit more expensive than TK Tankers. International Seaways has 40 vessels, market cap of 680 million, net debt of 531, for the total price of 1.2 billion, which gets you the price per ship of about 30 million. So again, let's figure out why is it less than Frontline and less than, let's say, DHT. Let's look at the fleet age. As you can see here, the average age is 11.4. So it's as old on average as TK's. Now, the interesting part here is that about 33% of the fleet is old, 15 years or older. So this looks even older than TK, because TK only had 18.5% of the fleet that was old. International Seaways has almost double that. On the newer side, International Seaways has about 20% of the fleet that is newer, 5 years or younger, while TK had 0. So overall, when looking at the age, it is comparable to TK, but still it has a little bit of a higher price per ship. So let's look at the composition a little bit and see if something can tell us. The composition of the fleet, you can see, is we have some VLCCs, we have some Suezmax, Aframax, Panamax, and LR2s. Out of the 40 ships, 13 of them are VLCCs, and that represents about 33% of the fleet. So again, going back to here, if the age is comparable, but International Seaways has more of VLCCs than TK, because TK only has one, that would explain why the price is a little bit higher. Okay, now moving on to DS Shipping and TRMD, which both appear to be the cheapest. If you look at the composition of both of them, and I'm going to talk about both of them at the same time, notice that DS Shipping, most of the fleet here, it's product, not crude, and only here a few of them are for crude. So now let's look at Torme. The entire fleet for Torme is product tankers, so it's not even crude tankers. So going back to this chart here, this alone explains why these two companies are cheaper per ship, because they're not even comparable to the competitors above, because DHT, Euronav, Frontline, TK, and International Seaway are mostly crude tankers, where DSSI and TRMD mostly are product tankers, which is a completely different market. Yes, DSSI has some crude tankers, but out of the fleet of 66, 50 of them are product, so that represents 75% are product tankers, and only 16 or 24% are product tankers. And TRMD, 100% is a product tanker. So that one is definitely not comparable to any of the other ones. Now, looking at Scorpio Tankers, we already know from the previous video that if you look at Scorpio Tankers, the entire fleet of 137 vessels is a product tanker vessels. So Scorpio Tankers is the biggest product tanker company in the world. So why is it that if you look at 137 vessels, market cap of $1 billion, net debt $3 billion, for a total price of $4 billion, that gets you about $30 million per vessel, why is Scorpio Tankers so much more expensive than the other product companies such as DSSI and TRMD? Well, the answer to this is simply in the fleet age. As you can see here, Scorpio has a very young fleet. The average age is less than 5 years. You can see it here. Almost 61% of the fleet is 5 years or younger, and 0% of the fleet is old, meaning 15 years or older. And when you compare this to DSSI and TRMD, you can see the average fleet for both of these is twice as old as Scorpio's. They don't have nearly as close of the percentage when it comes to the newer vessels. And on the older side, while DSSI doesn't have any old vessels, but TRMD has a significant amount, 34% of its vessels are 15 years or older. So going back to this chart again, it perfectly explains why Scorpio Tankers is more expensive than its other competitors. But Scorpio Tankers is less expensive when you compare it to the crude tankers. But again, it's not a good comparison, because crude tankers, when they're new, they're much more expensive than the product tankers. moving on. So up to this point, I would say that the pricing of these companies in relation to each other, it makes a lot of sense. Now, when it comes to the darling of the retailers, Nordic American Tankers, NAT, this is when we, for the first time, see something out of whack. As you know from the previous video, NAT has 23 vessels. The market cap is 665 million, net debt 326 for a total price of 991, and that gets you you are paying 43 million per vessel. Now, is this a reasonable price? Well, let's take a look at the fleet again. Nordic American Tankers has a fleet comprising entirely of Suezmaxes. The entire thing. No VLCCs, no Aframaxes, no product tankers. Purely Suezmax, which is a crude tanker. So you can, the closest comparison, I guess, for NAT in one way is DHT. And what I mean by this, DHT has 100% of VLCCs, where NAT has 100% of Suezmaxes. For DHT, you are paying almost 60 million per VLCC, but that VLCC has a pretty good age, right? 37% of them are new, only 11% are old, and the average fleet is 8.6 years. NAT, on the other hand, 56.5% of the fleet is old. Smaller portion of 17 is new, and the average age is about 50% older than the average age of DHT. But as I said in the previous video, the average age actually makes NAT look good. What you need to look at is how many of these ships are old. So for NAT to be priced at 43 million per ship, that's high. That's a lot higher than any relationships that are here. For 43 million, that's more expensive than Euronav. And Euronav, 60% of its fleet is VLCCs. The rest of it is Suezmaxes. So even if you assumed that Euronav's entire fleet was Suezmaxes, it would not make any sense for NAT to have a higher price than Euronav. But we know that Euronav, 61% of the fleet is VLCCs. Euronav should be priced much higher than NAT, and it's not. When it comes to comparing it to Frontline, well, Frontline has a brand new fleet, and it's only priced at just 10 million more per ship. Doesn't make any sense. So just in summary, this is a nice little chart that can tell us how much it is that we're paying per ship, and the relationship between the prices of the first 8 appear to be making sense in relation to each other, but the price of NAT is just absolutely out of whack in comparison to the other companies.